We have reviewed the components of the infantry squad and the basics behind using an infantry squad effectively. When commanding an infantry platoon in combat mission, the most important part is identifying your objective and planning your movement to the objective. Everything you do before making contact with the enemy is part of your movement plan. The infantry platoon is the lowest level tactical formation present on the battlefield. The platoon is most commonly organized around several infantry squads, meant to be committed concurrently under the command of an officer. The platoon HQ enables information sharing between the squads by use of radio, hand signals, and voice communication. It enables the use of larger supporting weapons, such as artillery, is responsible for aligning squads onto a common objective, and communicating with higher command levels. The infantry platoon is less focused on the close combat aspect of the fight, and more focused on orienting your squads onto a common objective. Individual squads are still responsible for executing close combat, but the platoon HQ is responsible for determining the direction of the platoon and the specific objective to be accomplished. The platoon should be prepared to provide its own reconnaissance, and every effort should be taken to locate the enemy by pushing scouts out in advance. There are many different methods to scout for the enemy, but we are only going to cover 2 of them. The platoon scouts advance a short distance, either crossing to the next terrain feature or advancing to the limits of the available line of sight. The platoon then moves forward to the position occupied by the scouts, and the scouts push forward again. This type of movement is very slow, but provides the highest amount of security. The scouts remain in contact with the platoon, and the majority of your firepower is able to be rapidly employed. The platoon scouts are pushed ahead of the advance, allowing for uninterrupted movement. As the platoon reaches each terrain feature, the scouts are already moving on to the next one. This type of movement is faster, but places your scouts at greater risk. The advantage is having room to maneuver against any enemy contact, and also having the ability to decline engagement if necessary. Depending on the tactical situation, the terrain, or the time needed to travel to the objective, your platoon can adopt various formations. The platoon advances in a single column, usually to follow a road or to advance through narrow terrain. This formation allows for greater speed, a reduced scouting requirement, and a very small contact area. However, the platoon cannot easily engage an enemy to its front and must deploy its squads before being able to effectively fight. The platoon advances along a broad front, usually to cross open terrain or to advance directly onto an enemy position. This formation is slow, difficult to maneuver, but allows for maximum firepower to the front. The platoon is less vulnerable to fire from the front, but more vulnerable to flanking fire. The platoon advances with one or two squads forward, with the remainder following behind. These two formations are the compromise between column and line. They are more maneuverable than line, provide better security than column, but are not as fast as column or provide as much firepower as line. These formations are good for all situations requiring flexibility, or if enemy contact is expected, but not certain. The platoon advances with its squads forming a diagonal line, facing either right or left. This formation is used to secure the flank of a larger force, or to provide firepower in a direction the enemy is expected to come from. This formation is also used when one flank of the platoon is against impassable terrain and is thus safe from attack. It provides firepower to the front and to one side, but is still vulnerable to fire from an oblique angle. One of the most important parts of commanding a platoon is to determine the platoon's objective and route of movement. Everything leading up to contact with the enemy is part of the platoon's movement towards its objective. Now, there are some very complicated procedures for route navigation. However, Combat Mission doesn't require many of them. You can freely zoom the camera around the game map, and it is impossible to get lost. What is necessary, though, is an ability to read the terrain between you and your objective, and to decide on a movement route that takes advantage of the terrain to reduce your potential exposure to the enemy. You must also be able to identify terrain features that will potentially restrict or enable movement for infantry or vehicles. Part of your movement plan must also include identification of potential danger areas, and to either avoid them or deal with them. The term danger area refers to any area on the route where the terrain could expose the platoon to enemy observation, fire, or both. Examples of danger areas include open areas, roads, trails, built-up areas, suspected enemy positions, known minefields, streams, rivers, and wire obstacles. Some danger areas, such as built-up areas, suspected enemy positions, minefields, and wire obstacles, should be avoided whenever possible. The rest of the danger areas should be avoided whenever possible, and if unavoidable, should be crossed as quickly and safely as possible. A linear danger area is an area where the platoon's flanks are exposed along a relatively narrow field of fire. Examples include streets, roads, trails, and streams. Crossing a linear danger area can be summarized as follows. Establish observation, in place near side security, cross a team or squad, establish far side security, cross the platoon, withdraw security, and continue the march. When enemy contact or observation is likely, the use of smoke can help you cross the danger area unmolested. If the large open area is so large that the platoon cannot bypass it due to the time needed to accomplish the mission, a combination of traveling overwatch and bounding overwatch is used to cross a large open area. If time is a factor, use traveling overwatch. If time is not a factor or enemy contact is likely, use bounding overwatch. Suppressing or destroying the enemy with direct and indirect fires is essential to success in close combat. The infantry platoon leader must be able to effectively mask the fires of all available resources at critical points and times. When developing your movement plan, you must also develop a fire plan using your available supporting weapons, and must account for any target reference points at your disposal. Developing your fire plan involves having an understanding of the effectiveness of different weapon types, the time it takes to call for fire, and the ability to call for fire within certain ranges of friendly forces. 60mm mortars can be called usually within 3 minutes, have a very small area of effect, and can be called relatively close to friendly troops. 75mm to 105mm howitzers, on the other hand, can only be called within 6 to 8 minutes, have a large area of effect, and should not be called within at least 300 to 500 meters of friendly troops. So when developing your fire plan, you might use the 105mm howitzer to bombard suspected enemy positions in a pre-planned bombardment. while leaving the 60mm mortars to be used on demand. Or you might push a forward observer ahead with your scouting detachments to allow time to call heavier ordnance before your platoon arrives. When working with assigned armored vehicles, the platoon leader can use them as a very effective force multiplier. They can be used as close support for your infantry squads, gunfire support for the entire platoon, or can be held in reserve to provide a reaction force against enemy movement. When incorporating armor into your movement plan, you can do one of two things: lead the formation with infantry, or lead the formation with armor. When moving through restrictive terrain or urban areas, when stealth is desired, or when under threat from enemy anti-tank weapons, leading the platoon with infantry is recommended. When moving through open terrain with limited cover, when the enemy position is known, or when there is a threat from enemy tanks or armored vehicles, leading the platoon with armor is recommended. If your intelligence indicates the presence of enemy anti-personnel minefields, using tanks to lead the platoon and detect the minefields is highly recommended, even if there is a slight chance of immobilization. Developing a good movement plan is an essential skill for a platoon leader. Reconnaissance is extremely important during the route march. Proper movement techniques and formations should be used whenever possible. Danger areas should be avoided or crossed as quickly and safely as possible. Supporting weapons should be used appropriately, and care should be taken to prevent fratricide. Armor is an effective force multiplier, but should be carefully protected from enemy anti-tank assets. Next time, we will have a look at the specifics of some supporting weapons, and we'll cover the employment of the infantry company. Chris Mallet here. Just wanted to thank you for watching, and also to apologize for my overly robotic delivery, but I'm not going to record that narration again. What happened was I recorded it the first time, but I ended up screwing it up so many times. The second time I recorded narration, I tried so hard and I was focusing so hard on not screwing up any of the words that I came out sounding like a robot. So I apologize for that, and if it's irritating, that's your problem, I guess, but I'm not going to fix it now. It's too late. I'll try to fix it in the next video. Hopefully I won't screw up again, but I don't use words very often, so it's difficult for me. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time when we talk about artillery and supporting weapons. Okay, bye.